Welcome to Us Live. This is the 200th episode of the Us Live podcast. I'm so happy to make it this far. So, man, it seemed like it's been an eternity, but I remember why I started the podcast. I started the podcast during the pandemic, so I can be what you call a pandemic podcaster, but also I can be what I am, a true podcaster. So I really started this show out of necessity. For the people who follow the show, you know that I'm a hip hop artist, and I started the podcast so I could stay in touch with my fans, and so they could get to know me, I could get to know them. I didn't have no goals of gaining new fans. I was just trying to stay in contact with my existing fans. I already had a website, so I was using that, but I wanted to use this platform to actually talk to my audience. I didn't even know how to properly format a show with the podcast, but I did want to keep the communication open, and that's what I did. And the show began to grow, and that's where I am right now. So when I started it, I was like, I didn't have no clue how I was gonna do it, like far as formatting the show or nothing like that. I have a home studio, so I have editing experience. I put out multiple projects as an artist, so I figured I could do an episode. But I did not know how to actually put a podcast together, so I just jumped out there. And what I did was I started out with my traditional episodes of Christmas and non-traditional episodes of Christmas. And I just went from there. I just jumped out the window, basically. I added segments to the show, like what's poppin' artists of the day. When I started, some of my episodes was extremely long, and a lot of my episodes had guests on there. But me being a hip hop artist, I look at having a lot of features as it not being a solo effort. You understand what I'm saying? And sometimes I have to pinch myself because long as you provide quality and value with your guests or even with the feature, that's all that matter. But my thing is I didn't want to be solely dependent on having guests. So one of my biggest obstacles, it wasn't getting a guest, it was how to record the guest. So like right now, you see me on Zoom. I reached out to a lot of people. I really didn't know nothing about Zoom because I didn't have a job that required me to use Zoom as a tool. But shout out to Zoom for being the answer to a lot of my problems because Zoom kept the audio and the video. I could get my guests without no problems. Initially, I was just using my interface and using my phone, having a guest call in and recording, dealing with the disconnections, the interference, and everything like that from the radio waves. But I actually got it together with Zoom. So my first episode, I consider it a success because I was just going raw, pause, just going raw. I had a lot of knowledge of the episode, so I just went with it. So, what I want to talk about is my first guest. So, initially, I had scheduled another guest to come on my show, I talked to the guests, I talked to the manager, and they was like, yeah, we gonna come on the show, we ready, we gonna do it, this, that, and the other, blah, 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 blah. But you always have to prepare for a curveball. You gotta have a contingency plan of something that don't go right. And this is not me ranting, this is just common knowledge. Because some people don't keep their word, some people don't say what they gonna do and stick by it. And then at the end of the day, you don't wanna self-sabotage yourself without looking at the board knowing that all these things can happen. So I think the guests didn't come on my platform just to hurt me or hurt the show, or maybe they thought they was too big. I don't know. I ain't gonna say their name because I ain't messy, but they not a podcaster. And that guest after the show kind of got his legs and was striving and growing and getting a little bit of success. They actually asked me to come back on the show, but at the time I was overbooked. So that's how karma worked. So my first guest was Donnie Diallo, the clothing designer and shoe designer. My first episode and guest was behind the scenes, and that episode did well. I truly, I truly am grateful that Donnie Diallo came on the show because it was actually a better episode and he added value. So that's what really stood out the most. So my first actual episode, it had a lot of music on there. More music than I like. It didn't have too much commentary with me speaking on there. And I kind of felt like my show was dependent on music and the artist, and I ain't want that. So part of me starting this podcast is I was listening to a podcast, and I consider the podcast that I listen to, they're a friend of mine or whatever, but I was giving them critiques about their show, this, that, and the other, and they really didn't care. But you know, nobody is more important than a listener. And at that time, I was a listener. So my wife was like, you know what, man, fuck that shit. Start your own show. So that was partially one of the reasons why I started the show, and then I kind of looked at the benefits later. I know it seemed like I'm jumping all around, but I'm just trying not to miss nothing. I'm just so happy to be here at 200. You just don't know. So presently, I got the interviews down. I know how to get guests. Um, I figured out that you could use lives as episodes. So Facebook, Instagram lives as episodes. So a lot of my Instagram lives and Facebook lives, I use this bonus episodes. I remember one of my episodes, well, one of my Facebook lives was called Get the Bag. And it was like a premonition of this podcast. I was talking about me starting a podcast. And if you go back and look into my episodes, it's an episode called To Win. Y'all go check that out. It's actually a premonition of me talking about the podcast and podcasting and everything that I plan to do. And I accomplished those things. I've been blessed to be on a lot of shows. Um, the first podcast I was on was Bet the House. It is now called I'll Explain That Later. Y'all go ahead and check that out. Then the Cool Out Corner. That was the second podcast that I was on. So shout out to Bet the House and the Cool Out Corner. They embraced me. And then I start getting a lot of friends in the podcast space that we jailed and we got cool. And we worked on my episodes, their episodes. We talk behind the scenes, just natural chop it up stuff. But starting out as a pandemic podcaster, it was a lot. The podcast movement was so strong, and I consider myself an indie podcaster. And a lot of these shows that I listen to, they not around no more. And I just want to shout out some of them because I think they had good shows. They stopped podcasting for whatever reason. Kinfluence, Coffee with Kendra, Grown Man Logic, The Barbie Way, Life Unplugged. Um, Let me see. The Ladies Lair podcast. All these podcasts was out with me. I don't know, maybe they had a few episodes up on me or maybe even a season up on me, but I listened to these shows. And then later on down the line, I discovered through Bet the House and Big Smash, like the Frocast, which is now Pot and Saved Our Marriage, Too Much Game, She Gets It podcast, At the Sound of My Voice podcast, The Cognac Room, what else? Mind Triggers. A lot of these shows. So shout out to them. I still rock with those shows. I listen to those shows on a weekly basis. So one thing about podcasting, I didn't know that I had an audience, but when I found out that I did have an audience, I just read the comments and the reviews, and I wanted to continue to get them something unique, something special, something different. You know, I found out that in competition, it often breeds like jealousy, envy, or whatever. But the way that I feel is there's nothing wrong with friendly competition. But as far as the Riders Live podcast, I'm the only host. I'm the only one bringing the show to people. So I'm my own competition. So there isn't no competition, but friendly competition is always good, you know? It's good for growth. So I went on another podcast, when they were celebrating a milestone and I was a guest on the show. I'm not going to say the name of the show, but after being on the show and everything, they tried to they tried to clown me. They tried to say that my show was almost like a carbon copy or a clone of their show, which is crazy. I wasn't gonna never speak about it, but I figure like right now, I'm in a mature space. I'm a little cooled off from when it initially happened, the incident, what have you, so I could speak about it, and I'm not being messy. So I went on this show, and they said that like flat out, hey, I noticed you follow my format, this, that, and the other, blase, blase. And then they tried to put a cherry on top, saying that my show is an interview podcast. But it's not. Y'all listen to it. I hope y'all like it. I hope y'all love it, cause I love delivering this show. But the thing about it is, it's no competition. It's too many things to talk about to bite off of a show. And you shouldn't be trying to one up nobody that you consider a friend. That's just how I feel about that. So y'all tell me what the Rider Slide podcast is. Y'all tell me what this 200 episode is. Y'all tell me some of the things that I could do better to get here, or some of the things that I did wrong. But I do this show for me, I do this show for the listener, and everybody look at things through different lenses. And that's just how it is. So that's what's popping. So on my 100th episode, I had the fans call in, and I wanted to do something different with this one. I appreciate all the fan appreciation and all the support from the other podcasters. I didn't want to ask them to do nothing because they've been helping me in every way possible. Whenever I wanted to put a show together, people came through. If they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it. If I scheduled something with somebody and I forgot because I was human, they picked up the phone and they called me and remind me. I forget. Even people who I schedule, you know, they got things going on. And, if things go over, they had a courtesy and decency to call me, and I appreciate all of these type of people. So shortly after my 100th episode, I did the Cream de la Creme episode, which was actually when I started doing episodes because I wanted to keep giving my audience shows. And I didn't want it to be themed or based around a season because I felt like with a season, you gotta stop and regroup and do this and do that. And I just wanted to keep the episodes coming. But as far as the Cream de la Creme episode, shout out to everybody who participated in that. Too Much Game, She Gets It podcast, Wolf Pussy Monologues, Mama Life podcast, uh, the Cognac Room, the Cool Out Corner. Shout out to everybody. Um, JR from West Virginia on Commonplace. Everybody got to do their thing on the Cream de la Creme. So when I did that, I didn't want people talking over each other, but I do want to do a podcast when I invite some of the homies on and we just have dialect and talk and discuss. Shout out to 12 Cal from the 12 Cal podcast, JR from West Virginia on Commonplace. Shout out to Too Much Game. We did that with the Michael Jackson 40th year anniversary episode, and we chopped it up. We also, or I also had great interactions with the Toxic Bible Study. We'll chop it up and do shows. We haven't had a Toxic Bible Study in a minute, but it was usually held on Sundays and everybody talked. So the reason why I'm talking about all these things is because all of these things and moments are key ingredients that help me get to this 200 episode. They like the ingredients, sprinkles of this, sprinkles of that, that help the show get better and help me get better as a podcaster. So season 3 is when I actually got my legs in the podcasting. I actually had the continuity and flow of my show, how I wanted to express things, all the messages I wanted to convey, and all of that. So season 3, it had memorable episodes as well, like Pussy, the KKK, and then also episode 1 of season 3. You know, that was really an episode that really put me over the top. So y'all go ahead and check that out. I don't want to name it because I want y'all to go look for it and check it out. Um, so season 3 is when I really felt comfortable with the pod and everything like that. Um, I also came out with the pod tape series. So before episode 100, I did a episode called Good Pods, which was me telling my listeners the pods that I listen to. I talked about the podcast. I gave a brief description. It was me conveying and delivering the message and the information. So with the cream de la creme, as well as the pod tape series, I wanted people to deliver their own platforms via my platform to listeners. It was something different. It was something innovative, and the fans liked it. I hope that all the other shows got more listeners because that's what it was for. And shout out to Mind Triggers, Wolf Pussy Monologues, Brunch Hour Podcast, everybody involved in the pod tapes, Ashley Janae Inspiring Discussions and Wrestling Discussions. Shout out to all the podcasters that have more than one show. People that have multiple podcasts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, like Shanby Podden. She got maybe two podcasts by herself, um, podcasts that she do with other people, a book review podcast. Shout out to them. Ashley Janae, she came out the gate with wrestling discussions and inspiring discussions. And I mentioned earlier, Law Speaks Podcast and Lissa Speaks Podcast. Shout out to the podcasts who have multiple shows. I'm sure it's a lot of work that goes into that because it's a lot of work going into this one show that I have. And I try to deliver on a weekly basis to everybody. I've had some memorable episodes on the Rider Slide podcast. So some of my recent and new episodes, Me versus Me, featuring Danya the Phoenix, Painful Times with T Black, the T-shirt Oasis with Aisha Hayes. Those are just some to name a few. Um, She Gets It podcast. Shan has been on here. Uncle Dolomite has been on here. 12 Cal. I recently did work with King John. The Cool Out Corner has been on here. I got a lot of great episodes coming up. But one thing that I wanted to mention about the podcasting is pride planning prevents poor performance. Just to keep the flow, because sometimes you need a break. And for those who don't know, I do music. I'm a writer. I'm an author. I'm a lyricist. I got a 9 to 5. Then I got 2 other jobs. I'm a barber. All that. So sometimes I have to plan these episodes out. And one thing about having episodes in a stash, for me, it's a gift and a curse because I tend to overthink things. By having too much content, that's the gift. And releasing them is the curse. What you gonna release? How you gonna release it? You know, I don't I'll be like, man, I don't wanna leave nobody hanging. I did this, that, and the other. But one thing that I do know is that whenever the episodes do come out, they always come out right on time. I just hit up whoever I did the show with. If it's something fresh, I let them know. We both promote the episodes. It's a cardinal sin to come on somebody's show and don't promote yourself. You're not promoting that show. You actually promoting yourself because at that point you actually a part of it. So let me see. Yeah, so by batching the episodes, I have air to allocate my time properly and I have room to work on other projects, stuff like that. So that's what's popping. So one thing, I almost didn't make it to 200 episodes because I was on Spotify, and Spotify they did help the Rider Slide podcast, but they tried to take my show from me. But everybody who listening to this podcast every week, me just disappearing and not being able to deliver this show, this content for you would be a devastating blow. And when I look for my show to come out that Friday, and they said that my show was canceled because of false advertisement and fraud, which wasn't true. It's just one of those things where people have allowed AI to have so much power where they could actually take somebody's show from them. Don't have the knowledge base or the understanding of the content that's going to be provided or delivered in that episode because AI don't have no emotions. AI only knows what's programmed. You understand? So they tried to govern and regulate my podcast because the name of the episode was in stores now. And anybody who ever went to go buy a CD and purchase a CD from the store, purchase a vinyl from the store, purchase anything, you know the experience of having that anticipation and what it's like. So, yeah, Spotify, they just wanted to make money with the kid. And they was blocking a lot of money and a lot of independent podcasters, they get jerked around by these platforms. That's why you always gotta have somewhere where you could deliver it where just in case it's any type of lunacy that takes place. So www.routersonline.net is my one-stop shop. It's the place for that. But this podcast is distributed by Red Circle, and I'm happy to be on Red Circle. I got a lot of things planned, and I plan on delivering a lot of things to y'all, my listeners. So basically, that's the gist of everything. This is episode 200. I normally would drop the mic, but I ain't gonna drop the mic. I'm gonna just drop the mic right now. So, me dropping the mic, I wanna let everybody know that I got a lot of great episodes coming up. I had episodes with Erica Gilchrist coming up. Alan from Empire. PPP Philip Martell, the Silverback. King John. Shan from She Gets It Podcast. Uncle Dolomite. I even recorded with Lingo, y'all. We gonna talk sports. We talk sports on that episode, and I got a couple of things coming up. So I'm actually recorded all the way up into December, y'all. I got episodes in the stash. I got some planned for y'all for the new year as far as the podcasting go. I got music on the way. Um, I don't really want to talk about that, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway. I'm gonna talk about it. So I got an album that I'm working on. It's gonna be 10 tracks, all produced by Sador Beats. I got an instrumental EP coming out. Y'all gonna be able to get all of this stuff on writersonline.net. I got a book out called White Lines. It's available on Amazon, and you could get your autographed copy on www.writersonline.net. So, man, I covered a lot of ground up to the 200 episodes. Not only in doing these episodes, I recorded my self-titled album, Writers. My whole discography is on writersonline.net. Y'all can listen to all of the projects in sequence, the albums, the singles. Y'all go check them out. What else? Yeah, I was doing a lot of things. I wrote my second book, it's done. I'm just thinking about the time to put it out. I'm working on music. Um, I got a couple of placements, like 3 placements for my beats. My alias is Sador Beats. Yeah. Sedor, Sador Beats. That's writers backwards. It's a little clever, right? So that's what I got coming up. I got some special planned for the new year. My second book is done. I'm working on another book right now, but I'm dropping the mic on Writers Live with these shout outs. So, shout out to my mom, my sisters, my wife. Shout out to T. Tenny, Josh, Treasure, and Shauna Bonner. Shauna Bonner is the one doing the intro of the Writers Live podcast when it come on. Shout out to her. Leilani, King Tyson, Yay Yay, and Trey. Shout out to Uncle Dolomite, King John, Pond Saved Our Marriage, Big Smash. I'll explain all that later. 12 Cal, Rose C, Max from the What Pussy Monologues podcast, Shan from Cozy Womb podcast and She Gets It podcast, and the rest of her podcast. Shout out to Porch Town with Miss McKinney. I want to thank her for bringing me on her show. I appreciate that. The Cool Out Corner, Sticks, let me see, Chain C, T Law from the Law Speaks podcast, the Corn Man podcast, Ashley Janae, Wrestling Discussions, and Inspiring Discussions, Conversation with Lamps, Styles from the Brunch Hour Pod, NYC Home Team Pods, Barbs, JR from West Virginia on Commonplace, Harrison from the 8 More Than 92 podcast, Mo at Mo, Kingpin and Crux from the Kingpin and Crux show, my homegirl Nico, Pape G, Skoda Hustler, they up next. Danya the Phoenix, shout out to her. Y'all go ahead and get her music, her new EP coming out soon. Let me see. Shout out to Lolo G, my grandmama, rest in peace. Shout out to one of my best friends, rest in peace, Tidra West, Keith Jefferson, Tanya Jefferson, and my cousin LP from the Hunneds. This has been episode 200 of the Rada Slide podcast. Peace.